Welcome back to another episode of the Pittsburgh Sports Castle Podcast. We are coming to you at the time of recording. It is the eve before the Pittsburgh Steelers take on the New York Giants in their opening. I keep wanting to say match, so I'm going to say match throughout the night because I'm in full on soccer mode. So that's just how that's going to work out. But the Steelers are taking on the New York Giants tomorrow. We got a lot of fun stuff to talk about in that front. Pittsburgh Riverhounds punched their ticket to the USL playoffs. I'm not here by myself. I have Cody Flavell with me tonight. Cody, sir, how are you doing?
I'm great. Football's back. The Steelers are starting tomorrow. A lot of fantasy football, a lot of betting going on today, so it's exciting to have that back. But looking forward to the Steelers getting their season back underway, and I'm excited.
See, I don't know if you have Hulu or not, but the last few days when I've been watching Hulu, all of the ads that are popping up are either political or DraftKings. And that's literally all I've been getting. So
Sounds
I feel like
right.
I know something. Yeah, I feel like I know something about betting, but that is definitely your world and our friend Joe Sanello's world too. I know nothing about betting and money, and if I ever wrote an article about that, nobody should ever read it. They should never take my advice. But yeah, football's back, and I feel like I've asked you this before, but before we get into anything, what are your thoughts on artificial crowd noise being pumped in?
See, to me, I don't generally necessarily hate it. I think that I've noticed that when you're watching the game, it's just kind of background noise to me. I'm sure for the players being there, it's a lot different. But just for the average fan, it doesn't bother me. I think as much as it does a lot of people. I really don't have a preference to, eliminate it or keep it. I don't think it's really anything more than just background noise to anybody who's watching the game. Because I'm watching the game to, enjoy the game, not necessarily what the crowd reaction and everything is. I mean, it is a little different because they do pump it in. So whenever you have a big touchdown catch and stuff, it's a little bit delayed. And it's not necessarily, like I saw a long bomb touchdown today. I can't remember the game it was in, but, the suspense of kind of the ball being in the air and then the touchdown's caught and you don't hear like the kind of the quiver of the crowd as the catch is caught. But other than that, I really don't have any animosity towards it.
Yeah, I mean, I come from it from another world, which is soccer, and there's so much talking in soccer, and like in football, there's a lot of talking, like before the snap, and then when the snap happens, it's just like a lot of grunting.
Yeah.
So I'm fine with it, in like football, but like for soccer, I hate it. I absolutely hate it. But yeah, with football, I think I'm more or less okay with it. Like it doesn't really bother me. It's just it's weird to hear it and know that like the
it's
faces you're seeing in the it's cardboard cutouts in the stands.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's crazy. But yeah, I mean it's weird, but anyway, let's see if I've learned how to transition better. Speaking of crowd noise, there we go. No, I still suck at transitioning, it seems. So the Pittsburgh Riverhounds, they aren't having fans in attendance. I know they had like a couple people in the stands, but I think that was just like families of players and stuff like that. But the Pittsburgh Riverhounds go into the playoffs again for the third straight year, which is super exciting, and a huge congratulations to Bob Lilly and his whole squad and the staff and everybody over at the Riverhounds organization for really holding it down. And I was telling you off air, I looked up, Pittsburgh has 28 points in their group right now. The way the USL is doing a season is like almost like a World Cup style group format. I think 3 groups per conference. So you've got the Eastern Conference and you've got the Western Conference. Of course, Pittsburgh's in the Eastern Conference, and there's about 5 teams per conference. And Pittsburgh, in both the East and the West, has the most points out of everyone, which I didn't know. I knew they had the most in the East, but I wasn't sure about the West. So that's a huge accomplishment for a team that, I know I've kind of backtracked on this and publicly apologized on air to Bob Lilly for saying, why the heck did you get rid of a lot of veteran players and why are you bringing in so many new players? But I mean, that's quite the testament to a team of a lot of, first-year players and a lot of second-year players like Anthony Velarde and Robbie Mertz. In Pittsburgh, they punched their ticket to the playoffs last night with a 5-0 win over Hartford Athletic. And that win was super important because Pittsburgh's in first place in their group right now. They're in Group F, and they have 28 points, as mentioned. The team behind them is Hartford Athletic with 19 points. So Pittsburgh has basically, of course, if you don't know soccer, it's 3 points for a win, 1 for a draw, a tie game, and 0 points for a loss. So they basically have 3 wins on Hartford Athletic, which is really important. And there's 3 games left in the regular season. 1 away coming up this coming weekend. And then the last 2 are at home. 1 is against Hartford. And then I think the last home game, I don't remember who it's against entirely, but it's somebody in their group. So that's all that matters. But Pittsburgh, they punched their ticket to the playoffs, and last night was a really great win. 2 goals for Ropapa-Mensah, 2 goals for Ryan James, who, by the way, is a defender, who, by the way, was playing in a defensive midfield position. And I was listening to the comments last night that the Riverhounds sent over, and Ryan James said, I'm just grateful that Bob didn't put me up top in a striker position or in goal where Danny Vitello was at. So Ryan James is kind of covering every inch of the field right now for Pittsburgh, and it's something he has to do with Canardo Forbes out with injury for the next 4 to 6 weeks. And, the fact that Pittsburgh still can get a 5-0 win without Canardo in their midfield, who really has become the heart and soul of the midfield, heart and soul of the team, especially now with Kevin Kerr retired and gone. Somebody to stop and really put on their veteran shoes and just kind of roll with the team and lead the team. So great on Ryan James, great on Ropapa-Mensah. And then I'm not going to say the 5th goal because it wasn't the last goal, but it happened right before halftime. Pittsburgh was awarded a penalty. Anthony Velarde got up and took it. The club is on a 6-game unbeaten streak. They are on a 4-game winning streak. So huge testament to them, huge testament to Bob. And this is going to be coming up soon. I don't know how soon, but we're going to have one of the players from the Riverhounds on the Pittsburgh Sports Castle podcast. I'm working with the team's communication director, trying to get that figured out. Schedules are crazy with everyone, but sooner or later, we're going to aim for before the playoffs, their final regular season game. They better give me a good birthday present because it's on my birthday. So we're going to try to get a player on sometime here in September. So be on the lookout for that. But Cody, have you anything to add for the Riverhounds? Just some general hype even?
Not really, not even a thing. It's just good to see that we have a semi-successful team here because the Penguins went out way too quickly. The Pirates are obviously the dumpster fire that they are, and hopefully that's the only mention that we make of them the entire podcast. And, hopefully, we're not exactly sure what we're going to get with the Steelers this year, but hopefully they'll be kind of the other saving grace that the city needs, especially with everything going on. So.
Yeah, for sure. And, Bob, to end on this note for the Riverhounds, he said, listen, we're taking it 1 game at a time, but he really, really thinks that this team could go deep into the playoffs. And that's saying something because they're missing some key pieces from last year that were really, really solid players. So best of luck to them. They still have 3 games left in the quote unquote regular season, and then it's on to the playoffs for them. So we'll keep covering them. We'll keep having more on them. And we're hoping for another saving grace. So, let's move to the Steelers part of our podcast. Tomorrow, well, I say tomorrow night because time of recording is Sunday night, but this will be out on the sound waves for everyone on Monday morning. But Pittsburgh Steelers will kick off their season against the New York Giants, the Eli Manning-less New York Giants, which is just absolutely crazy to think about. They do it on Monday Night Football. At what time does that start? Like 8:15?
There's actually 2 games tomorrow, so there'll be the 7 o'clock game, then there's a West Coast 10 o'clock game. So,
Oh, wow. NFL's really changing things up. Okay, so then the Steelers are playing at 7 o'clock tomorrow, people. So after dinner, sit down, grab some snacks, and don't fill up on dinner too much. But we have a lot to talk about for the Steelers. There's a lot of different points about the team that we got to look at. And then, of course, we will preview just kind of the season in general and also the Monday Night Football matchup. So diving into our first point, we obviously have to talk about quarterbacks. Big Ben coming back from an elbow injury, a very serious elbow injury that took him out of pretty much the whole season last year. How do you think Big Ben is going to look coming back? Because we have to remember, he's not a spring chicken.
yeah, it's kind of hard to tell, especially at his age. I mean, that's such a major injury to have to deal with. There's been, plenty of pitchers in baseball and, quarterbacks who have had this kind of surgery and haven't come back the same. Especially for someone like Ben to do it at his age, it's definitely going to be tough. They're going to really have to rely on him as far as their success for the entire season. I mean, I'm sure he's going to come out a little rusty tomorrow. I don't expect him to do much as far as lighting up the scoreboard, especially in the first half. I think he's going to be just kind of getting his feet back under him, especially without the preseason games and everything. I mean, this is going to be his first live competition outside of competing against his team, since the injury last year. So, in my opinion, I think it's going to be a rough go to start for Roethlisberger. But I think knowing him, and he's got a reputation for not necessarily having the best workout regimens and things along those lines. I don't know whether I believe that all that much. He does look a bit out of shape at times, but I think he actually looks really good right now. And I think that he's out to really prove a lot of people wrong. And I think that, motivated Ben is one of the most important things as long as he stays healthy. I think it's a really good thing for the Steelers.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the preseason game. Obviously it's going to affect a lot of teams. I think we've seen that so far here in week 1. But do you think it hurts the Steelers more, especially in the quarterback position with Ben coming back, that there isn't preseason games? Because, I mean, the starters usually don't get a lot of time anyway, but in Ben's case, I think he would have gotten a little bit more time.
Yeah, I don't think that Ben would have gotten incredibly more amount of time than he usually would. I mean, a lot of the times they do usually only play him for maybe the last game of the year. Sometimes the third game he'll get like a series or two. But coming off the injury, like you said, it definitely would have been different to see how much time he would have got just to kind of get his feet back underneath of him. But they're going to be good, I think, as long as Roethlisberger stays healthy. That's really going to be the biggest telltale sign on how their season went. I mean, they had a really good defense last year. They were a solid team last year and had very poor quarterback play, and it came back to haunt them, and they weren't able to, make a playoff run that I think they could have made had Ben stayed healthy.
Yeah, and if he, the big if he doesn't, if something happens, Pittsburgh kind of shuffled their quarterback slots and they brought a familiar face back. Josh Dobbs is back into the squad. Devlin Hodges is now on the practice squad, and Mason Rudolph is the third string backup quarterback. A lot of shuffling there. A familiar face coming back, a familiar face that I think improved with his time away from Pittsburgh. And I think the Steelers saw that and they thought, hey, I think he's a better option now than he was maybe 2-3 years ago. Just what are your thoughts on Josh Dobbs coming back? And if something would happen to Ben, do you think he could fill in better than how the Mason Hodges tandem kind of filled in last year?
I don't know. I think I saw a depth chart that said that Mason's actually going to be the backup and Dobbs is going to be the third string guy. I personally am a little bit higher on Mason than a lot of people are. I know that's kind of a ridiculous thing to say after the way he played last year. Based on a lot of the things that I'm hearing from people outside of camp, they seem to believe that Mason looks a little bit better this year than he has in past camps. And again, it's just training camp, so it's not necessarily a great indicator. But I don't think it's hard to improve much on what Mason did last year. I think anybody can admit that he was really, really bad. And they're going to need some type of competent play just in case they can't cut it with Ben. I'm hoping that we don't see either Dobbs or Rudolph at any point this year, because I think that just means that Roethlisberger stays healthy, and that's obviously the best case scenario for the Steelers. But coming off this type of injury, you just don't know. And having Dobbs here, I think, presents a bit of an upgrade over Hodges. But you look at that token at the same time, and Dobbs should have been the third string quarterback last year, and they liked Hodges more. So I don't know if that says more about the kind of the way that Colbert evaluated how good Dobbs is, or if maybe they admit their mistake and they decided to keep Hodges around in case, obviously with the COVID factor and everything, anybody can be down for a given game. So to have a familiar face on your practice squad readily available is a really good idea. And to bring a guy in Dobbs back who knows the system already, and you brought him back for absolutely nothing. So it seemed like a no-brainer move. And hopefully, like I said, we don't see any of those three quarterbacks. Hopefully Ben stays healthy the entire year and the backup situation becomes a moot point. But it's good to have three guys there that you can trust in a way and know that they at least know the system if Ben would go down with an injury again.
Yeah, and you are correct looking at the Steelers depth chart. Roethlisberger, Rudolph, Dobbs. That's the order of it right now. So my apologies there on mishandling the depth chart. A little bit of optimism maybe on my end from giving Josh Dobbs a little bit more credit. But yeah, that's all good points. I think the quarterback position this year is going to be one that a lot of eyes are going to be on. We already know what the defense can do. We know that there's some issues at wide receiver, and we'll get to the points in a minute. The question mark right here is Big Ben. If that elbow is going to hold up, if everything's going to hold up, just all eyes are really on Ben Roethlisberger right now. But like I said, there's still eyes on other portions of the team too, and one of those portions is the wide receivers. Long gone are the days of Antonio Brown, Martavis Bryant, Darius Hayward-Bay. I was trying to think of his initials and I couldn't get to it. But so Juju Smith-Schuster, AJ Menendez wrote about this earlier today in the preview that he wrote up on our website. He had an off year last year. It wasn't his best year. He had some games where he looked really good. He had some games where he looked really bad. In my opinion, I don't think there was really anything in between. So he's still slotted as the number one receiver, and he needs to have a better year. What do you want to see from Juju Smith-Schuster this year?
Well, I believe that he's going to be a lot better this year. I think and it had to do with the entire offense, obviously had to do with the play of the quarterbacks. You have Mason Rudolph and Devlin Hodges, two guys that have never thrown a football in the NFL before last season, throwing passes to them, and neither of them obviously exceeded in the role. You have a Hall of Fame quarterback in Roethlisberger who, if he stays healthy, should be, at least adequate. I mean, he may not be the Ben Roethlisberger that we know, but I think even a 70% of that is still better than what we got out of Hodges and Rudolph last season. I think it's still good enough to put the Steelers in a position to make at least a run to the playoffs, not necessarily a run any further than that. But I think Juju's going to have a bigger year. I mean, especially because it's going to be a contract year for him. He's going to be likely, I would say, probably not a Steeler next season. Anything can change, obviously, in that amount of time. But, the Steelers have a lot of they're a team that spends to the cap, and it's going to be hard to see them paying Smith-Schuster what he's going to want. He's been a really up and down receiver over his career. I mean, when he's had the quarterback play, he's been really good. Last year he wasn't as successful, and he even fumbled in a couple key situations last year, especially late in the season. They really just need him to be the number one receiver that he can be for this season. I think, like I said, he's going to be motivated to really put his, put his best talent forward, try to win, or try to win a lot for the Steelers, and be a guy that gets a contract in free agency next year for a very lucrative deal with a team that's probably going to have the cap space to pay him, because I don't see it being the Steelers.
Yeah, for sure. And the rest of that wide receiver group includes, and if I pronounce names wrong, I'm sorry to the players, you have been warned. Deontay Johnson, you have James Washington, Chase Claypool, who was the Steelers' number one draft pick this past year, Ray McLeod, which I think is probably one of the best names in the NFL. So those are your wide receivers. And then for tight end, you have two names listed as number one. There's a bit of a tight end battle going on here between Eric Ebron and Vance McDonald, and then you have Zach Gentry behind them. So let's go back to Deontay Johnson. He definitely surprised a lot of people last year. I think, heading into the season, he was somebody that you didn't know the name. You weren't supposed to know the name, and you didn't think you were going to know the name. And this year he is a starting wide receiver slotted across Juju Smith-Schuster. So what are you excited to see about him? What impressed you about him last year? And just your overall thoughts on him.
With Deontay Johnson, he was a guy that was drafted out of Toledo. Obviously it's a smaller school, but to be drafted from a smaller school, and be a mid-round, like a third-round pick like he was, is rather impressive. It tells you that there's a lot of talent there. But when you look at the Steelers' history of drafting wide receivers, it's hard to name a team that's drafted wide receivers better than they have over the last 20 years. When you look at their track record of, getting Antonio Brown in the 6th round, getting Juju Smith-Schuster as a 2nd-round pick, he turned out to be fairly good. There's a litany of names that you can point out. And I think with Deontay Johnson, he's another guy that he's been really, really good. He's probably been a lot better than people expected. And it was just one of those things. The Steelers find talent at wide receiver, whether it's in the 1st round, whether it's in the late rounds, the mid rounds, they just draft receiver well. And I think Deontay Johnson's just another example of that. And I think he's going to really benefit this year. There's a lot of fantasy people out there that think he's going to have a breakout year, and I agree with that. I think that Juju Smith-Schuster is going to attract a lot of attention. I think you're going to see some double teams on him, which is going to free up, guys like Deontay for single coverage. And like I said, if you have a competent quarterback in Roethlisberger, he's going to find that, he's going to expose that, and he's going to do a really good job of getting guys the ball that are open. And Deontay Johnson is the type of guy that got open a lot last year, and if he continues to do that, he'll be really good.
Yeah, for sure. And then I had mentioned earlier about kind of a tight end competition here going on between Eric Ebron and Vance McDonald. Last year, Vance McDonald was that number one spot. He who did he edge out a couple years ago for that? He went to the Lions, Jesse James, right? Yeah, he edged out Jesse James for that spot, and then James got brought onto another team. So there's two tight ends here. Who do you think wins?
I'm hoping it's Ebron. I've seen a lot of Vance McDonald. I was really high on him when they got him, but he's been a disappointment. He's been he's been hurt a lot. He hasn't been bad when he's played, but Ebron is a very athletic tight end. He's a guy that I think the Steelers are going to use a lot this season. They've missed a guy like Heath Miller that can, they can throw the ball over the middle too. And I think Ebron's that type of guy. He's athletic. He's a big tight end. They're going to be able to throw to him in the red zone. He's going to be a primary red zone target, I think, along with Chase Claypool. So they got a really good tight end in Ebron, but he's also had his injury problems over his career. And if he can't stay healthy, tight end is going to be a really ugly position for the Steelers this year. But I think if they both stay healthy, it's going to be a strong point on this team for sure.
Yeah, and it's a position that Ben Roethlisberger has really liked over the last few years. And, tight ends are very much, I think tight ends are like fullbacks, very much underappreciated in terms of their blocking, in terms of creating space, in terms of being kind of an extra offensive lineman. And so um, let's go to the fullback position. It's brotherly love up in Steeler Nation with Derek Watt joining. I remember when he got signed and everybody was like, let's get JJ Watt here now. And I was like, listen, guys, if he's going anywhere, he's going to Chicago because that's where his wife plays professional soccer. So he ain't coming to Pittsburgh. Sorry. But Derek Watt, the kind of, I don't want to say the forgotten Watt brother, but let's be real, he's kind of the forgotten Watt brother. Maybe it's because he doesn't have a J in his name. Um, what's that commercial they do? The Subway one where they order the the sandwiches and the mom's like, "This is why I named you Derek." It cracks me up. I love it. So Derek Watt is with the Steelers now. To kind of group and can't really group him with his brother because his brother's on the defense, but what kind of experience do you think he brings to this offense, and what positives in his game do you like?
So it's really hard to judge him just because he's a fullback, and there's not a lot of fullbacks that really get used in today's game. I think they paid him very handsomely for a position that doesn't get used a lot. However, he's one of the better special teams players in all football. He makes a lot of tackles on special teams. So, obviously the Steelers place a premium on special teams to pay him the amount of money they did. I also think it had a little bit to do with trying to keep TJ Watt here longer term, bringing his brother in here obviously is something that you can use as a negotiation tactic, keeping his brother close to him. I mean, Roosevelt Nix was the fullback here for the last couple of seasons and realistically didn't have much of a role in this offense. He did play a lot of special teams. He wasn't a bad special teams player, but the Steelers opted not to keep him and went out and signed Derek Watt. So hopefully, I mean, for the $3 million a year that they're going to pay him, he's going to make, some special teams tackles. I would think that you're probably going to see him on the field on offense a little bit just because of the amount that they paid him. I mean, he's obviously just going to be used more as a blocking guy in the I formation, but I think at the end of the day they're going to use him as often as they can, get the money for him that they paid, and I think he won't really be as much of an effect to the offense. I think he'll be an upgrade as to what Roosevelt Nix provided, but at the end of the day I can't see it being much more than a very good special teams player, maybe getting a touchdown or two here and there when the Steelers are on the goal line.
Yeah, for sure. And one player though that is supposed to at least have that type of impact when the Steelers are on the goal line and really just on the field in general, running back position. And James Conner had a really, really injury riddled season last year. Riddled with injuries, didn't really put up the numbers that he expected to. Jalen Samuels, Benny Snell Jr. got a lot of time as well due to those injuries and just with the Steelers' usual rotation of running backs. So James Conner's listed as number 1 on the depth chart with Benny Snell Jr. right behind him, Anthony McFarland Jr. at number 3, Jalen Samuels in the 4th running back slot. So what do you expect to see from James Conner this year, and what does he need to do? It's hard to imagine him not staying in Pittsburgh because of the connection. Of course, he went to Pitt. He's from the Erie area, and he's a Pittsburgh guy through and through. But at the same time, if you're not producing, you're not going to last long. So what does he need to do to stay in Pittsburgh and to simply have a better season this year?
Well, it's a tough question to answer. If you look at the past couple weeks, there's been a lot of running backs that have been signed to some heftier contracts. Guys like Alvin Kamara, guys like Dalvin Cook, Christian McCaffrey got paid pretty well last year. And no one can, lump James Conner in with those names. I mean, when he's healthy, he's been a very quality running back. I just can't see the Steelers paying him the $6 or $7 million a year that it's probably going to take to keep him around. I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty high on him this year. I think if he does stay healthy, like I said, he's a quality running back. He's been really good when he can stay on the field. And I think that it's only going to help. I think the NFL is also transitioning to a league where you need 2 or 3 running backs to really have a true good running back backfield. I mean, there's not too many teams that employ one running back that takes all the carries. I mean, Christian McCaffrey's on the field for 97% of the Carolina snaps. But you look at teams like the Saints, they've got Latavius Murray and Alvin Kamara. Teams like the Vikings have Dalvin Cook and what's the kid's name? McKinnon. So there's teams that, or not McKinnon, Madison, sorry, Anthony Madison. But, these teams have multiple running backs, and I think the Steelers do have some depth there. Behind Connor is a guy like Benny Snell, who was a mid-round draft pick last year. He has a lot of talent. I proved that last year in some of the time that he was on the field. Anthony McFarland Jr. is another guy. They say he has some character problems, but if he can kind of fit in with the locker room, I think he's a guy that can really be a big type of big play player for the Steelers. And then Jalen Samuels, who I'm not that high on. I really don't know why they kept him around this season. I don't see much of a need for him. I didn't like the role that he played last year, and I don't think that, especially adding Anthony McFarland, they even need to have Jalen Samuels on the roster this year. But, it's neither here nor there. At the end of the day, I think Connor needs to really just, stay healthy, stay on the field, and I think the Steelers are going to have a really solid production out of their backfield this year.
And a big key to that and keeping someone up and staying healthy. Obviously we talked about we need Ben Roethlisberger to stay up and stay healthy, and a big part of the running game too is the offensive line. And really, I think the offensive line is one of the most consistent things that doesn't really change a lot. You've got Villanueva, Pouncey, DeCastro. Zach Banner has become a fan favorite for many of his quirks on social media and just in the games and whatnot, coming in as comes in as an eligible receiver at times. I would love to see him score a touchdown. Matt Filer was a newer name last year, but he has pretty much cemented himself into that starting role at left guard. I don't know how deep we can get into them, but the offensive line. Any thoughts on that area?
It's been tough to. It was tough to watch them last year. I mean, they obviously weren't the same as they had been the last couple of seasons, but it didn't help that they had the quarterback situation they had behind them, because all teams had to do was, load the box with like 7 or 8, defensive front guys like the linebackers and the defensive ends and everything, and they tried to block up the run because they knew that if the Steelers tried to drop back to pass, it usually didn't result in much. So they forced the Steelers to try to become a running team. And I think that's a lot of the reason last year, too, why Connor wasn't as successful, because I think teams knew the Steelers had to run the ball more than they wanted to. So I think at the end of the day, you're going to see maybe a little bit more success out of the offensive line this year. Hopefully, if Roethlisberger stays healthy, you're going to have to game plan now for both the passing game and the running game. You can't just force the Steelers to run the ball when you have a guy like Roethlisberger who can burn you if you don't account for his talent. It's not going to help that DeCastro is going to miss the first game with the injury. He's definitely probably the best lineman we have. But, it's the next man up mentality, and that's always what Mike Tomlin's kind of, it's kind of been a staple for him is, regardless of who goes down, it's the next man up that has to perform. And, you just have to fill in the holes wherever. So hopefully DeCastro will come back soon and we can get back to full strength on the offensive line. I don't know the situation with, Zach Banner and Chooks Okorafor. I don't know that Zach Banner is going to have that starting job the entire year. I think that they want to see what they have with Okorafor, especially because they did use a mid-round draft pick on him. And I think they kind of had seen him as the next right tackle. So we'll see. I mean, it'll be a battle between him and Banner. If Banner can continue his strong play that he proved in camp to win the job, then, hopefully that's a benefit to the Steelers. But he's also was a guy that Cleveland, thought highly of, and he was really bad there. They cut him, and the Steelers brought him in. He's been a little bit better here, and obviously the whole eligible receiver thing last year, I think, is a lot of the reason why he got his name. But he wasn't terrible in the situations that he was in. So we'll see. I mean, I don't have high hopes for that position. I hope that Okorafor eventually ends up starting. I'd like to see him get some time in. And like I said, we get DeCastro back and hopefully get this offensive line to full strength, and we can see what they're really made of.
Yeah, for sure. Now let's switch over to the other side of the field, the other Watt brothers side of the field. The Steelers had one of the top defenses last year. Honestly, it was the reason why they kept their head above water. We talked about the merry-go-round of destruction that was Mason Rudolph and Devlin Hodges, but I think that the defense, every time in these games, I would be so frustrated for them because they would, get a fumble or an interception and they would do something great, a 3-and-out and whatnot. And then the Steelers offense would get the ball and just nothing happens. So obviously that needs to change this year, but the defense, I mean, there's always critique for every position. And of course, there's going to be points to get better for the defense, but boy, were they good last year. Can they repeat the success that kept the team above water last year? And if so, how do they do it?
I think they don't really have much of a choice to be as good, especially if, Roethlisberger would go down with injury again. And we have to suffer through, some backup quarterbacks again. The Steelers still went 8-8 last season with, Hodges and Mason playing the majority of the games. And a lot of that had to do with the defense's play. So I don't see why they can't be as good as last season. The only starter they're not returning is Javon Hargrave. So they're returning 10 of the 11 starters from the defense last year. And they're replacing Hargrave with a former first-round pick in Tyson Alualu. So to me, I think they're going to be just as good. I don't see why they can't be. When you look at, the dynamic of their defense, 8 of the 11 starters that they have currently are former first-round picks. That's important. I mean, you got, Minkah Fitzpatrick, TJ Watt, Tyson Alualu, Cam Hayward, Bud Dupree, Devin Bush, Terrell Edmonds, guys like that. When you have that kind of pedigree on defense, that's a big deal, because every single one of those players has lived up to or come close to, that first round pedigree. And I think that's a lot of the reason why the Steelers have had such a very good defense over the past couple seasons, especially last year. Obviously with the addition of Fitzpatrick there, early in the season really changed the dynamic of the defense. So, it's gonna be big. I think that they're gonna be the main factor, other than Roethlisberger, obviously, that contributes to the success of the team overall this season. I don't know that they'll be as dominant because they were very, very dominant. A lot of the thing that I think that they slipped off towards the end of the year last year was mainly because they were on the field for so long. They were on the field for 35, 40 minutes a game. And they were just dog tired. And I think it wore them out towards the end of the season, and you kind of saw the fatigue set in, and it really ruined their chances to make any sort of run with Mason or Duck. Obviously, when they're going 3-and-out every possession, it was really hard to kind of catch your breath on the sidelines and then have to go back out and make a big stop to help your team win the game. So I think if Roethlisberger stays healthy and they can kind of keep the defense off the field a little bit more, that'll be more than beneficial to the team, and it should be a good combination for the two of them.
Yeah, the defense was really, really solid last year, and yeah, like you said, it almost seemed like it took a minute and they were back on the field, and that's just something that they need their rest, of course, and they're professional athletes, they can do it, they can keep up, but yeah, I mean, they get tired too, and I think that throughout the year, I think there's a lot of good backups on the defense too that are going to help out as well. A familiar face that came back is Sean Davis. And I think he's backing up at least two different spots on the Steelers depth chart. He's backing up, both safety positions, the free safety and the strong safety position. And the free safety position is taken by Minkah Fitzpatrick. And everybody, there was so much controversy last year. Oh, why did the Steelers give up a first round pick? Why are the Steelers giving up so much to the Dolphins for this guy? And then he kind of shut everybody up. He went from being a relatively decent name in the NFL to now, I remember he was listed on the NFL Top 100, which is like voted by the players, the staffs and whatnot. So a full year of Minkah Fitzpatrick. It's awesome. It's great. What do you think it's going to look like?
Well, when you look at last season, people said that, it was disappointing to see Minka's, interception numbers and stuff go down towards the end of the season. Well, that wasn't because of the way he was playing. It was mainly because teams stopped throwing his way. I mean, he made such an impact on, the first 5 or 6 games that he played, making interceptions, making big tackles, forcing fumbles, that teams stopped throwing to his side of the field because they didn't want to take the risk of him making a big play to change the entire game. So realistically, it almost eliminates, an entire side of the field when you're not throwing his way and you're trying to avoid, throwing over the top, because you're not going to beat Fitzpatrick. He's proven that he's a great playmaker, and if you throw his way, he's probably going to pick the ball off. So realistically, going into this season, I don't think you're going to see many people testing him, and I think that's really it's going to help the defense a lot, because you're not going to see a lot of teams try to throw deep on the Steelers because he's going to be ball hawking. He's going to be looking for the ball. And I think that if you can keep a lid on the defense, that's one of the more important things. I mean, especially when you get into the playoffs and you play teams like the Chiefs, who have a guy in Patrick Mahomes that can throw the ball over the top, do whatever he wants with the ball, and Fitzpatrick's there to kind of keep a lid on that defense. So if anything, I mean, having Fitzpatrick on the team is just going to make them as good as they were last season. And, you just changed the entire dynamic, and the whole team benefited from it, obviously, as we saw. The trade was a magnificent one, especially when you look back at some of these other trades that other teams have made when you realize the Steelers only gave up a single first-round pick to get Minkah Fitzpatrick. And I think the Bills gave up like 2 first-rounders plus a couple other picks to acquire a guy like Stephon Diggs, who is a good receiver for them. But when you look at the dynamic, is he going to change the team like Minkah Fitzpatrick did? Probably not. And there was realistically probably nobody the Steelers would have gotten with that 15th pick that would have been a game changer in the way that Minkah Fitzpatrick is.
Minkah Fitzpatrick was born on November 17th, 1996. He's playing professional football for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm a month older than him, and I'm talking about him on a podcast. So it puts into perspective how much of, you just saying right there, how he came in and kind of reshaped the team. And he's only 23 years old. I think that means a lot. And when he came to Pittsburgh, he was only 22 years old. So that says a lot about him. It says a lot about his character. So I'm excited to have a full year of him on the Steelers defense. I'm excited to see the work that he and the rest of the defense are able to do. They were probably easily the highlight reel of the 2019 season last year. Any other thoughts on the defense?
No, I mean, I'm excited to see Devin Bush continue into year 2. I think he had a phenomenal season last year. I'm excited to see the duo of Bud Dupree and TJ Watt try to wreak some havoc on quarterbacks again this year. It was a lot of fun to watch them get after quarterbacks last year, and obviously lead the league in sacks, I think, for the 2nd or 3rd season in a row. So, that combination is going to be nice, especially because I don't think Bud Dupree is going to be here after next year. I think this will be his final season in Pittsburgh. I don't see them paying him the money that he's going to command on free agency, that he, and a lot of people labeled him as a bust, and he really changed his career here over the last season or 2. So, props to him if he goes somewhere and gets a lot of money from a team. I mean, good for him. He earned it. I don't think it's going to be from the Steelers, and I don't think it has anything to do with his play. I just think it has to do with the fact that the Steelers are a team up against the cap, and they're going to have to re-sign TJ Watt here really soon, and I don't think they're going to want to tie up $30 or $40 million a year in their 2 outside linebackers. That just doesn't seem like a thing the Steelers are going to do. So I'm just going to enjoy what's left of this defense this year, and we'll see what happens from there. But
enjoy the glory days of the new youthful Steelers defense. Let's get into my favorite area, football. This is the part where you actually kick the ball with your foot. I had to make the joke. I know it's a poor taste, but whatever. Special teams. There's a new face, so there is something to talk about on special teams. So our kicker's Chris Boswell. 2018 he had that really, really just bad, downright not good year. 2019 he bounced back, had a nice season last year. And there's a new punter in town. Dustin Colquitt is now part of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He replaces Jordan Berry, who I don't believe he was picked up. I haven't seen him get picked up by any team. But Jordan Berry's gone. Dustin Colquitt, who used to play for the Kansas City Chiefs, is in. Long snapper is Cam Canada. As long as you don't hear his name too much, it's usually a good thing. The kick returner, there's a bit of a competition here between Anthony McFarland Jr. or Ray McLeod. And then the punt returner position is Deontay Johnson. It seems like a area that we can just pass over, but I mean, look at today with the Cincinnati Bengals. Go down for a game-tying, game-winning drive, and then Randy Bullock misses a field goal. So obviously, it's a position that can make or break some games and whatnot. But I guess to really focus on one area, because punters are, I hate to say it, but punters are punters. As long as you kick the ball and you get it inside the 20, it's usually a good deal. But for Chris Boswell, like I said, he had that rocky year in 2018. He bounced back in 2019. Are you comfortable with him? Are you confident in Chris Boswell?
Yeah, it's really hard not to be. 2018 was a really rocky year, but he fixed himself last year, and outside of 2018, he's been a really, really reliable kicker for the Steelers. He's got a good leg, he's got an accurate leg. He's the type of guy that when he comes on the field, he's somebody you feel confident in putting the points on the board for you. So we'll see. I think he's going to have another decent year. The only thing that scares me is looking around the league. I mean, there's kickers seem to be missing field goals more and more. I was just watching the games today, and I think I counted about 6 or 7 missed field goals from just the games that I was watching. And a lot of them were, a couple of them were chip shots. The Randy Bullock one, obviously, it looked like he had hurt himself on the kick, but that was only a 30-some yard field goal. I know here on Sunday Night Football, the Rams kicker, I can't quite remember his name. I know he's a rookie kicker, but he missed a short chip shot field goal that he donked off one of the uprights. So, the kicking game is such a fickle thing. The Steelers are paying Boswell, a solid amount of money for the kicking position. So hopefully he can continue to do what he does. Obviously, Dustin Colquitt's probably going to be an upgrade over Jordan Berry. I was not a Jordan Berry fan in any way, shape, or form. I never thought that he was that great. I thought it was even more of a testament to the fact that it seemed like the last 3 seasons the Steelers brought in a punter at every training camp to challenge him, and nobody could beat him out. And obviously bringing Dustin Colquitt, who is a relatively bigger name in the punting market, he seems like a guy who's been really consistent over his career. So to have a more consistent punter is obviously something to be confident in, because punting, believe it or not, as small of a part of the game as it is, it has an effect on, the outcome of the game. If you can't pin your opponent deep, then, you're giving your opponent good field positioning, and obviously you have one job, and if you can't do it right, I don't understand why he was on the roster for as long as he was. Obviously, like you said, with Canada, if you're not hearing his name, it's probably a good thing. So, he's been here for a while, ever since Greg Warren retired. So they have, Canada, who's been solid enough for them. As far as the kick returning position, Anthony McFarland Jr., he's probably not going to see a ton of time at running back. He'll probably see a little bit, but he is fast. He'll be a guy that I think, the kick return game is one of those things now that is really not as big of a part of the game as it used to be. Kickers are kicking the ball further. The kickoffs are from the 35-yard line now, so a lot of the times it's going to be touchbacks anyway. There's not too many times where you do see guys actually get to return the ball. And I don't think you're going to see much of Ray McLeod. I don't think he's going to get a helmet on game days unless you see a couple injuries to the wide receivers. I think it's just more of an insurance policy who looked really good in camp and they didn't want to let him go, which I don't blame them. I think if he earned the position, that's good, but I think they're just going to roll with their top 4 on game days. So it'll be interesting to see how much we actually see of him. And as far as punt returner, I mean, Deontay Johnson did a really solid job of that last year. Like I said, with the punt return, as much as punting is a part of the game, punt returns are as well. I mean, if you're a quick, shifty player who can, gain 15, 20 yards on a punt return, that's a really good punt return nowadays. And obviously Johnson has the potential to take it to the house every once in a while. So, I think the special team is going to be a big part of the Steelers game this year. Like I said, Boswell is pretty good. You'll have an upgraded punter, and Deontay Johnson's a pretty good punt returner. So I like their special teams group this year.
Yeah, and one of the best stories I heard about Chris Boswell in 2018 was when he was struggling. They called up Sean Sweezum, who was their kicker for like 5, maybe 6 years, and they were like, "Hey, come here and help this guy out." And I think he's still based in Pittsburgh. I'm 99% sure he's based in Pittsburgh still, and he came and immediately there was improvement. So that's really cool to just, hey Sean, what's up? You wanna help me out with my kicking game, and just get the former kicker back in town to help you out. So yeah, I'm confident in Chris Boswell too. That's why I drafted him in fantasy. So overall for the season, let's give our prediction before we move on to the Monday night football matchup. What do you think the record's going to be? Who do you think is going to be the biggest impact player on offense and defense? We'll leave special teams out of it because we can both just say Chris Boswell, or we'll just say the ghost of Jordan Berry in Heinz Field. But biggest impact player, offense, defense, and then record.
I think offensively, the cop-out answer to say is obviously Ben Roethlisberger. The quarterback is the most important position on the field, but if I had to go with somebody outside of him, I think you're going to see a really big season out of James Conner. I'm going to predict that he's going to play at least 14 games this year. I think it's customary that he'll at least get hurt, but I think that the injuries he'll suffer this year are going to be more minor, so he might miss a game or two and be banged up. I like James Conner a lot. Like I said earlier, I think if he stays healthy, he's a very solid running back. It's just been about him staying on the field, which he hasn't done enough of. And, at the end of the day, I think that if he stays healthy, he's probably going to be one of the more impact players on the field. And defensively, I'm thinking probably TJ Watt. He wreaks so much havoc on the outside. Having him and Bud Dupree chasing down the quarterback is definitely going to be tough for, the tackles on the offensive line on the opposing teams to stop. If you set both of them loose, they're really, really good pass rushers. TJ Watt, I think, had like 12 and a half sacks or somewhere around that last season. So, if he stays healthy like he has throughout his career, I think that's your guy that makes the biggest impact on defense, and obviously Minkah Fitzpatrick as well. But I think his impact is more so what he doesn't do, simply just because he won't be tested as much this year as he was last year, before teams really found out how good he actually was. So.
And what's your record prediction?
I don't have the schedule in front of me. I remember it vaguely. I know that they have a fairly easier looking schedule. I'm going to assume that Ben stays healthy. I think they are a 10-6 team. I think they'll have their surprise losses in there, to a team like the Jets or somebody along those lines, because they usually lose a game like that throughout the year. I think they'll either split or lose both to Baltimore. So there's your 3 losses. Toss in another loss to maybe, I think they play Indianapolis at some point. So
yep, week 16.
Yeah, we'll chalk that one up as a random loss. Maybe split with Cleveland, although Cleveland looked like an absolute dumpster fire today. So yeah, I could see 11-5 or 10-6. I think is the floor with the healthy Ben Roethlisberger. I don't think they finish much higher than that, but if he does stay healthy and all things are clicking, and based on their schedule, I think you could see them do a little better. But I have probably about 10-6 as their floor.
I think my impact player on offense, he's not a starter, but I'm going to go with Chase Claypool because I think he's proven him. I've read something the other day that he's going to get a lot more snaps than you would normally think of for a rookie. That's what Randy Feichner, the offensive coordinator, said. And I can see them using him a lot in red zone plays because of that 6'4" height. So I think that we'll use him to the advantages that they can use him to. I'm excited to see him. Another new exciting name. Seems like a really great guy who has a good personality. So glad to see him get his shot. He's Canadian American, so that's a little bit different in the NFL. So I'm excited to see him. I hope he gets some good touches tomorrow, or today, I guess I should say, against the New York Giants. And I think my impact defensive player, you said that your cop-out pick was Ben Roethlisberger. My cop-out pick is Minkah Fitzpatrick. I think he's going to have another really good year, and just having him for a full year in Pittsburgh, I think is going to do wonders. He's already proven to be such a leader at the ripe old age of 23. So I'm excited to see him. And I think I'm a little wary about the elbow injury. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little wary about it. But I'm gonna say 10-6 probably too, or maybe. I hope I'm wrong about this, but 9-7. I still think Pittsburgh makes the playoffs. I don't know if they'd make first place. Baltimore looked a little shaky at parts today, but I think for every team you're going to get rust because, I mean, nobody had a preseason. COVID is still kind of a thing. So, I hope I'm wrong about 9-7. Hope I'm more correct about 10-6, but that's where I think the Steelers are going to go. And then I guess, just to close this out, what are you looking for tomorrow against the New York Giants?
Yeah, before I get to that, I just wanted to say, too, there is that extra playoff spot this year for both the AFC and NFC, so there will be 7 teams making the playoffs as opposed to the usual 6. So I think that even a 9-7 or an 8-8 team can sneak into the playoffs for sure on that front, which is, I think, an important development for a team like the Steelers, who have actually, if there would have been 7 playoff teams over the past, I think, 10 years, the couple seasons that they missed, they actually would have been that team. They were the 7th best team, so it would have benefited them more than any other franchise in the NFL. So I think that, especially with how tough Baltimore is, they probably aren't going to win that division. I think they're better suited as a wild card team, and I think they're going to be probably one of the 5, 6, or 7th best teams in the AFC. So you would have to think that they would end up making the playoffs. But as far as the game tomorrow night, I don't know. I like the Giants, I think, a little bit more than most people. But you have a guy like Daniel Jones, who's a younger guy. He's going to play a really good defense. He's going to be in his sophomore season. There's always the sophomore slump that people talk about, in sports across the different sports. So I think he's a guy that, is going to play a factor in their success, but I think he's going to struggle tomorrow night. I think the Steelers are going to, really get after him, especially with that offensive line the Giants have. It's really not that good. And that's a lot of the reason why Saquon Barkley, I think, hasn't had the impact that he could have, just because it's, their line isn't as good at protecting the run game and Daniel Jones as they should be. So I think the Steelers are going to end up winning the game. I'm thinking like 24-10. I think Roethlisberger has a passing touchdown or 2. James Conner will add a rushing touchdown in there. I think that you'll see maybe 80 or 90 yards from Conner and maybe another 30 or 40 from Benny Snell. I like Chase Claypool tomorrow night. I think he matches up well, especially in the red zone. I don't know how much he will play. I think the Steelers want to, use the trio of Smith, Schuster, Johnson, and Washington, but they obviously have plans for a guy like Claypool because it's hard to bring in, such a big body and not want to use him, in the red zone in passing situations. So I don't know. I think I have the Steelers 24-10. And hopefully, if it's not that score, I'll take a win regardless, but that's my prediction.
Doesn't have to be pretty as long as it gets done, right? So, that's great. Well, that's pretty much it for our show tonight. I'm going to chalk up the Steelers having a win too as well. Don't ask me for scores because it usually always backfires on me, and I'm not trying to curse the Steelers this year. So that's pretty much it for our show. Cody has a really great outlet on Twitter called Let's Talk Pitt. It's Let's Talk PIT, not 2 T's, just one. You can find him also on Twitter at Cody_625. I'm on Twitter at Rachael Kriger. There are 2 A's in my name, not just one. Of course, the Pittsburgh Sports Castle Twitter is at PGH Sports Castle. We are on all major platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Be sure to check us out by searching our name. We're also on Google Podcasts, Deezer, Podcast Addict, Podchaser, and of course Spreaker, where we record our shows. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the show. Your feedback is important to us, and any reviews posted will help make the podcast more visible to listeners. We are always looking for podcast prompts, topics, ideas, any suggestions, questions. Feel free to reach out to members of our team and to our Pittsburgh Sports Castle Twitter to send some ideas along. We are slowly going to be adding to our team in the next couple weeks. So if you want to inquire, you can DM Cody, me, you can DM the Pittsburgh Sports Castle Twitter. We'd be happy to take any questions and talk to you about joining the Pittsburgh Sports Castle team. Thanks for joining me, Cody, and thanks to everyone for joining us. And we'll see you next time, hopefully with a Steelers win in the pocket.